So I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and a good New Year. While everybody else has been staying inside, I've been going to work and occasionally getting some time to put in some work on the GE14T012. Now electronically I've got everything dealt with. So the sets recapped, resistors replaced, etc. I bought a alignment generator, a Heath kit off of eBay a little while ago, and did a very basic alignment on it. But it plays well, and after removing some sources of electrical interference in my room, I was able to get a nice clean picture and really good sound. So I'll demonstrate that later. But for now, the topic is getting this thing all back together. So the cabinet, I sandblasted at work. I have not done that for the front of the cabinet. There are some dents I need to pound out of it. But that went pretty well. It was a cheap Harbor Freight cabinet, but I was able to get it all cleaned. Sorry about that. And if we take a look here, it's not quite done. The designations for all the controls on the side, I still need to fill those in with paint. So I'm going to carefully take an X-Acto blade and remove the white that has wound up in the crevices, because there's not a lot of depth right there, and if I put blue over that, it's just going to run everywhere. Same thing with the tuner control, so I'll get all of that taken care of. The two-tone paint scheme, I worked with Rust-Oleum colors. I've been told by some folks, oh, I could have had it color matched by guys at the auto parts store. Yeah, but I mean, if somebody else wants to do this on, on a budget, I wanted to look for commonly available paints that'd be easy to get. And, you wouldn't have to have anything mixed or crazy like that. So what I went with is Rust-Oleum. And the colors that I actually chose, as close as I could reasonably get them, this is canvas white, gloss canvas white, and then this is seaside blue, I believe. So for reference, here's the canvas white, and gloss seaside blue. This is a paint and primer in one, but I still use standard Rust-Oleum primer on all of this before I actually put the top coats on it. It's 3 coats each that I like to do with the Rust-Oleum. They say 2 coats minimum. I prefer 3 just for, I just like it. Some light scuffing in between the major coats. Now the way GE seems to have done this cabinet was they blasted the whole thing white. Very thinly, and then they blasted the remaining parts blue to cover over the white for all this trim and on the bottom and everything. And it was really, you could tell it was done quickly. This was, mass production. So there wasn't any real masking. They masked the upper section to make sure to get all the trim, but then on the bottom, originally there was a lot of missing spots where you could see the white shining through, and it didn't really look professional, but no one really cares. It's the bottom. Same thing with the inside, actually. I spent a lot more time on the inside than GE probably ever did. There was very little paint on the inside here, and there was tons of spray through of the blue all over the inside. I went ahead and I primered the whole thing inside. I did about 2 coats of the ivory, and then when I went to mask off the areas for the blue, I did all the major areas, the grill work, the channel selector, the speaker grill, all of that. But I figured, it's not going to kill it to get a little bit of respray in around the edges. So the front and the back, there's a little bit. Not that big of a deal. I also left the original, I think this is cloth electrician's tape, or friction tape, sorry, on the outside for protecting the bell of the CRT. I left that on there. They painted over it, or actually, no, they didn't paint over it, but I mean, they probably would have. And yeah, I honestly, I'm quite happy with it. Now, as far as color correctness goes, I think the canvas white was it's the closest that I could reasonably get to the original ivory. The blue, on the other hand, I tried hard to find a Rust-Oleum blue that adequately matched the original. So here's the front plate versus the seaside. Their color is much more green. And for whatever reason, the Rust-Oleum range, you either get really green or really blue, and that's about it. So I wanted a blue-green. Seaside was as blue-green as I was really going to get without it looking well, like hunter green almost. However, I do like that this blue is much more striking, I think. This, I mean, for all I know, this could be just dulled over the years. I mean, if you look at the inside, is that actually showing up well? Yeah, if you look at the thin layer of paint they got on the inside of it, you know, I don't think it's really darkened much. That's kind of nasty. I mean, hell, they didn't even get paint in some of these areas. You could tell how quick it was. They just shot the outside as they needed it. But yeah, I'm happy with the color match. I think this lighter blue is actually going to make it look pretty striking. I love two-tone paint jobs on metal cabinets like this. It gives it kind of a 50s hot rod or like a Chevy Bel Air kind of look. And some guys really do like putting two-tone paint jobs on like Bakelite radios and things to make them have a little more sellability. I also would like to point out the screen protector that went inside this. Let me get this out of the way here. I finally figured out how to remove that after a bit of screwing around. So here's the original screen protector. It appears to be some sort of plexiglass. It is shaped, it is curved, and I'm going to clean it up. I thought about using a polishing compound on it. I'm not sure yet. I'm also hoping the CRT has enough brightness to actually make the picture viewable through this in a lit room. Because you know, it's been used and the brightness obviously doesn't crank up as far as it should anymore. But to get this out, there are only 2 metal retaining clips that hold it in place. Now, if this is the bottom, this guy just sits in here like that, and then at the top, these 2 retaining clips just sit in here. And I couldn't quite tell if they were riveted. They aren't. All they do is they bear against, the spring portion bears against this edge, and then the other end of it just sits up inside of here. It would just kind of click like that. You just press it in place and it would snap there. And all I had to do was get a flat blade screwdriver under the inside and gently lift this end up until it cleared this lip and popped clean out. Might want to wear some eye protection when you're doing that, though. They do have a decent amount of energy in them, and you will fling them across the room if you're not careful. Speaking from experience. But yeah, got that out, not a big problem. The one thing that I haven't quite decided on yet, though, is the logo on the front of the cabinet. It's made out of plastic, as far as I can tell. And it looks like they actually painted over during the process and then went back and removed the paint from the top. You can see the, how close can I get this? The G on the General Electric symbol actually still has some blue-green paint on the surface, the 2 E's as well, and the edge of the C. Almost like they just kind of quickly scrubbed the paint off the top of it and called it a day. I'm not sure if I'm going to leave that in place when I clean this and then do the same thing, spray over it, try removing the top, or if I'm going to try and remove this because it looks like all they did to adhere it is it probably had 3 plastic tabs coming through and they simply melted them down into a puddle on the other side. So I could cut these away with an X-Acto knife or something, pop the badge off the front, which would leave a deep enough nub to realign in those holes, and then I could just glue it back on. That does mean, of course, that the colors wouldn't quite match, but I also don't want to accidentally destroy this in the sandblaster. I don't know how much of a beating it'll take. So I would feel much better removing it, cleaning it separately, and then possibly spray painting it and trying to get this same effect with the new paint. But in addition to that, I also have a number of physical defects to replace. We got that dent there. What else we got? Now this edge is screwed up. That corner's been screwed up. It was sitting on the floor in the back room of some guy's, quickie dick antique store out in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. So it's got some wounds. That's mostly the reason why I wanted it repainted. Was it looked pretty good externally, but then it was obvious it had a lot of battle scars, and I thought, well, I'm going to go through all the trouble of doing the electronics. I like to make things look as good as they work, reasonably. They tend to come out looking better than they work, in my case. The only caveat to that is the protector on the back for the CRT, which does still stick out just a little bit given its compactness. I don't think I'm going to have any good way of removing this stuff from a cardstock material. It's obvious it's soaked in there, but I'm not going to replace it. You can still make out all the markings and everything, and all of the attachment points are still there. They haven't broken off like on a lot of other backers that you see, you know, where someone's gotten a little over aggressive with and they've ripped off the tabs and it's just hanging on by one lousy screw. So that's going to stay original. And then what I also love about this is the great big chrome mohawk bar that goes on the top for carrying the thing. The chrome on that is in pretty good intact condition, very little pitting that I would expect. Some smudges and junk, but I gotta break out the metal polish and I'll give that a good clean. Overall, this cabinet I think is going to turn out, I think it's going to turn out great, and I can't wait to finish it up, but got a bit of delicate work to do with this lettering. Now once this is done and the paint has dried, I am going to clear coat the entire thing with Rust-Oleum Clear just to protect the paintwork. Now one other thing is, if you decide to do the cabinet like I did, I use regular old blue masking painter's tape to do the striping on this, and I'm not happy with the edges on these. Let's see if I can't bring this up to the camera here. Come on. The edge is not perfectly sharp. There's a lot of little pucks and whatnot, and in a few spots on the cabinet, like right here, you can see there's a difference in the height of the blue. So like here, it comes down a little further and then it jumps up right there. That's actually a result of me trying to get the tape edge to be the dividing line. And then on the other side, I realized a much simpler way of doing it is to just put the tape over the entire edge and then take an X-Acto blade and gently cut around the base. And that gives you a much finer line. Yeah, I thought about that too late. But for just a quick amateur paint job, from 2 feet away, it looks really good. And for something in my personal collection, that's all I'm worried about. Is it'll look good, it'll work good, and yeah. So I've got the cabinet out of the way right now. Actually, the cabinet is done. I already did all of the fill on the lettering, as well as a bit of wet sanding and a clear coat to finalize the main cabinet. The front was sprayed same blue with a little bit of wet sanding. It actually came out really, really well. The lettering, on the other hand, I had some difficulty with because of the depth in the paint, and I wasn't able to actually clean them out enough to get a good fill, and I also sort of screwed up the volume control lettering. But I'll get to that later. For right now, the last thing I need to do for this set is actually some aesthetic stuff. More specifically, the knob assemblies, all of which are pretty nasty. And of course, the channel selector knob, which is obviously damaged. Oh, and the GE logo, which, of course, snapped when I removed it. See, there's not a whole lot that's really crazy going on here. For the main control knobs, they have these nice, fine, what you really call them, it's not knurling. They have this grip surface here, and they're all filled with dirt and, I don't know, maybe tobacco residue, all sorts of other junk. I'm going to get those over to the sink, give it a scrub with a toothbrush I got. So those will get all cleaned. Same thing for this. This is the section that actually slots just behind the channel selection knob, so it sits like that. And you have the inner and the outer control. This one being for the fine adjustment to get the channel locked in, and of course the coarse adjustment for the channel, the actual tuning section. This guy is actually 2 pieces that are just sort of pressed together. Not a lot of force. I can wiggle this off there. There we go. So that's pretty dirty, and so is that. I'll give these both a scrub in the sink with some Dawn, get them cleaned up. I'll also clean this one up as well. I'm not sure how hot water will react to these markings. I don't want to get rid of them. And also, there's some sort of odd brown goop on here. I don't know what this is. It feels kind of waxy. It probably could have resulted from where this thing was stored. It was sort of in a back garage and by a tool a workbench. But I may have to use some harsher chemicals to get that junk off there. But in order to put this back together, thankfully when it broke, it left this really nice large surface in here and on there to situate against, because this goes under a fair amount of torque when you're rotating it. All that force has got to go through that thin, basically that thin section of plastic there. But for that, I'll be using some Loctite I borrowed from work. Same thing on the GE logo, actually. I'll just gently bond those back together, and thankfully the GE section has its own little pip on the back there to fit into the holes on the front. Same with the others. And I'm just going to have to glue this to the front of the TV, because originally these were pressed through and then the ends were heated and sort of puddled over to grab the inside. Can't do that anymore. They're not long enough. And I think I'll just give them a light scrub with the toothbrush and some gentle water. I'm not going to repaint them. The plastic blue actually doesn't look too bad sitting on the... I set it on the front of the TV. It doesn't look bad. I like it. So we'll leave that alone. We'll get it fixed. And yeah, I'll be back in a minute with some cleaner hardware. So, good news and bad news on the cleaning process. Good news is some of this, like these, the fine-tuning knob came out really well, cleaned up really nice, GE logo, same thing. Bad news is the bristles on this toothbrush were just not strong enough to really get into the really, really fine plastic separations on these knobs. And also, whatever is in these things, trapped in there, is really, really tough. Soaking it with hot water and soap didn't do anything, and I even tried resorting to a really stiff nylon brush. And then after that, I even used an extremely fine screwdriver to try and pick through these things, and none of that really did anything. Whatever this is, it's built up over decades. So I think I'm just going to leave it be. It's not really hurting anything. It doesn't look great. But honestly, the only thing I can think of that could really get that out of there would be an ultrasonic cleaner. I don't have one. So these are easy to take off. I think for now what I'm going to do is put these back on the set and then get over to repairing these last few pieces, because I'd really like to see this thing with everything back on it. Alright, well, I was going to show the process of actually gluing the knob and everything back together, but that did not go quite as planned. So we're just going to ignore that for a moment and take a look at the logo. The GE logo managed to get back pretty decently. Not a lot of residue left over. I'm not going to do anything to really improve the appearance of the color. I'm going to leave the paint on there as is, and I'll wind up just putting a little bit of glue in each of these 3 pips to get it back on the cabinet. The tuning knob, however, I don't know what it is. I probably shouldn't have used this Loctite glue. It made an absolute mess on the inside of here. Backside doesn't matter so much, but this, I don't know if this stuff was partially expired, if it's been left open. It just was a disaster. And I can't seem to find a solvent that'll get rid of this brown crap, or for that matter, loosen up the edges here to get rid of the excess. Plus, if I soak it with like acetone or something, not only will I maybe remove this junk, but I'll probably also separate the glue and completely undo all my progress. So I think at this point I'll just keep my eye out for a replacement of this. I mean, this television, they probably made a good number of them, and it's not going to be perfect anyway, so I just wanted to get it up and running to have something to play with, and for now this will do. Maybe someday I'll get a whole box of round 2-its and throw them in every project I have. But in the meantime, I'm going to get these back onto the cabinet, and then we'll take a look at the completed unit. So we'll start at the front here. The GE logo decided to fight me at the last moment getting it in. As soon as I went and I pressed the left section in, the glue broke clean right there. So I wound up putting glue on the back of this whole thing and that just to get it to stay there. Yeah, it kind of sucked. Screen protector, it's got some scratches in it, but it's not bad. We can move over to the other side here. We can see the results of my attempt to paint in the lettering. Gonna recommend lacquer sticks or something else if you would decide to do this. These all didn't turn out so bad. This one I royally screwed up trying to use a black paint pen in a moment of frustration. So, yeah, that sucks. The selector and tuning, not too bad. It's still legible. And with the knob reattached, it is much, much easier to select. And of course, the fine tuning cleaned up well. And I also have a lamp around here. Brand new cheater cord. So that works and fits nicely. I do need to find some new self-tapping screws. I only had 3, and it's kind of migrated away from the corners here. I'm guessing these originally filled in and they just kind of got chewed up over time. So these are the only ones remaining. But yeah, let's fire it up and see what we get. I am going to torment you with the same VHS tape I've been using previously because that's all I really have. Go ahead and hit play here. And see if it catches fire. Oh, the light from my monitors is kind of ruining this. There we go. Oh, yes, there's one thing I forgot. Oh dear.
Recognizable shape in the world. Now, it's not hard to see why. Hi, I'm Jack Dalby. The Volkswagen Beetle with its putt-putt motor in the back.
Yeah, you see those wonderful lines dancing across the screen right there and making it real hard to see anything? That is the result of my internet wall box, which I'm going to have to turn off here real quick so we can actually watch this. Right after I shut down my computer. But I'm impressed that the tube has enough brightness to actually come through the screen protector, because this is fairly dense and dark plastic. Okay, so that's shut down, and if we now pull out my internet deal, voila! Although you should still be able to see some of the scan lines.
Recent times were troubling for the company.
There we go.
Its philosophy of building an honest, simple car at an honest price ran up against
Contrast
the
about
growing appeal
right.
of Japanese cars, which offered more frills and flashier looks and were even cheaper to buy.
So that's maximum brightness.
Volkswagen sales
Trying to get the color so it's better defined.
560,000 cars in 1970 to less than a fifth that number in the early 90s. But now, after 20 years of struggle, Volkswagen seems to have been revitalized here in America.
It looks like I might need to change the vertical a little bit. You can just barely see the top of the image. It should be a little further up.
In fact, they look as sleek and
Let me see if I can't twiddle the horizontal. Is this the horizontal or the vertical drive? I don't want to upset that too much.
And in the future,
oh no, there's actually there's 2 other controls in there.
A new Volkswagen that evokes the feeling of the Beetle. A car that will mix the shape of the original lovable bug with the technology of today.
Yeah, it'll distort pretty easily. Now obviously I'm not going to get anything if I go to the other channels. I would be really surprised if I did. That's channel 5. It's funny because occasionally it does sound like it's... Alright, so now we're back around, but it locks really well. That's the important thing, is the sync circuits are doing pretty good.
Of all the fine German engineer.
But the other thing I wanted to point out is I didn't show an alignment for this thing. I did kind of do an alignment on it. I don't have a proper sweep generator set up for aligning the 10.7 megahertz FM audio path, and then there are multiple frequencies in this thing that have to be swept, or it can be swept with an AM signal generator that can go into the megahertz range. What I wound up doing was using a Heathkit signal generator for TV purposes, and I kind of just cheated. I just peaked the circuits in this. So I went through, and you know, one of them is at like 45 megahertz, one of them is 50 or whatever. I don't remember the exact frequencies, but each section has a single coil that can be peaked, which with an FM circuits, you don't really want to peak them. You want to kind of do stagger tuning. But because the video signal is, from what I understand, mostly AM, you can peak those circuits, and then afterwards you're supposed to put an oscilloscope on it and look at how the waveform looks, and then adjust it until you match the waveform nicely. With it just peaked using my signal gen, it produced a good picture. It you know, what am I trying to say? The sync circuits are working well. The audio is good. It's not crackling. The fine tuning works. The coarse tuning works. And all the other controls function the way they should. So at this point, for a portable television with not a lot of complicated circuitry, I'm going to call it okay. Just for something that I can be able to watch old programs on for the heck of it. And I'm not doing it for a customer, because if I was actually doing it for a customer, I would have gone the extra mile, because I don't know. I've got some more stuff coming up, and I actually do have a client's radio that I need to work on. So I need to make space on this table for that, and start watching some classic Twilight Zone and other stuff on this guy. So thanks for sticking around to actually watch me complete this thing, because it took a long time, and I apologize if you've been waiting for something to come up, but life got in the way. Oh man, it doesn't have the satisfying shrink like my 49 does. Oh well. But thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon with more crap to repair.